eye stuff really gets to me, and I was just
Oh,
it was really
sorry.
interesting. But
This time on It's Just a Show, the first in our Origins trilogy, where we look at the first episodes of each of the 3 MST3K hosts. First up, Joel's first episode, Season 1, Episode 1, The Crawling Eye.
But first, let's do some follow-up. We got a lot of listener feedback over the last little while we were on our break. So we have our first Sci-Fi defender. Cliff in Michigan says, I remember just being so grateful that Sci-Fi picked the show up. I loved every minute of it, except for Hamlet.
Also, another Sci-Fi Defenders, which I swear is not a direct-to-video wrestling movie that I star in. Troy from Twitter reminds us that he actually really enjoyed the Sci-Fi era and recommended a number of episodes, particularly his favorite, which was 804, The Deadly Mantis, which we may or may not be getting to relatively soon.
I'm willing to be wrong about the Sci-Fi. Of course, I would be more than happy if it turned out that there's some real gems in that series that I had just missed. So let's see what happens when we return to them.
We also got another letter on the topic of sci-fi from April in Pennsylvania, who said, I really enjoy your podcast, and a lot of your comments are spot on. Thank you for putting into words my issues with Comedy Central versus sci-fi. I did want to add one little bonus tidbit to an episode. One of my favorite bands, Man or Astro Man, uses old sci-fi movie sound clips in their songs. They use several dialogue clips from It Conquered the World throughout the song Transmissions from Venus. And oddly, they don't end it by telling us that man is a feeling creature.
You learned almost too late that
Man or Astro Man covered the MST theme song. And it's fun, even if they called Joel Joe. Now, have you listened to much Man or Astro Man, Beth?
I have not.
How deep are you into surf rock?
Not as much as I'd like to be.
Well, that's something to add to your YouTube playlist, because I've listened to some Man or Astro Man, but I only started listening to them because Joel would sometimes show up at their live shows for the performance of the Mystery Science main theme.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I can't tell, like, having heard their version of the song, I can't tell if they're saying just Joe, or the singer's just kind of cutting off. It's like cutting himself off, so you just can't hear him say the word Joel. I don't know, but yeah, Man or Astro Man, fun band.
I'm amazed to hear that something like It Conquered the World had as much cultural resonance as it has. I'm amazed that it just didn't fall into obscurity as soon as it was put out and flopped. That so many people ended up watching it and then bringing it into their own cultural creations.
Well, thinking back on it, like, yes, when you sit down and watch It Conquered the World, you've got a lot of scenes of Peter Graves thinking about being on a bicycle, Peter Graves getting on a bicycle, Peter Graves getting off his bicycle, and that's like, I don't know, 80% of the movie, but that's sweet 20% where Beverly Garland is gun-toting and firing shots at an evil carrot. I mean, that's pretty great. I can see why it's remembered.
Good point.
One last thing, just in follow-up to our mini-sode, that was a kind of odds and sods recording of different things that were cut from previous episodes for time, and I was talking about how I saw a bit of the Max Headroom incident, but this is where things get a little bit confusing, because I rewatched that infamous signal intrusion, and then I remembered that it didn't quite look like the thing I saw, like what I saw. And it was still like a PBS. I'm not sure what PBS affiliate we had in Newfoundland, but it looked like an ordinary clip. Like, it almost looked like Matt Furrer doing it, and may have just been like an old commercial or rerun or something. Sometimes in like the old days of analog TV, signals could get crossed and you would suddenly start getting like another channel. So maybe it was just that, but I'm curious if there were more Max Headroom incidents or weird stuff going on with that character, other than that infamous bit of a guy mumbling crazily to himself and getting spanked by an unseen hand. We did have to take some time off, and we're both fairly busy. Beth, what did you do in the interim between then and now?
I was rushing to submit a draft of my doctoral dissertation. So I just needed to be in that headspace for a little while, and I succeeded. I submitted it to my supervisor, so now I get my life back for a little bit.
Yay!
Yay.
Do you have to defend or do anything like that? Are you a sci-fi defender?
Well, it's not completely done because I had to submit it to my supervisor, and she is pretty liberal with her metaphorical red pen, so I'm sure there'll be some things I have to change. But at least there's a draft. That is the important thing. There is something I can work with, and I don't have to create something out of nothing anymore, which is a real relief.
That's wonderful news. Now, it makes me kind of think that every now and then I regret not pursuing academia beyond an undergrad, but I used the last 2 weeks to catch up with every Adam West thing that I haven't seen, and I don't regret my decision.
You really shouldn't. I am looking forward to reading books for pleasure again someday, because it's been about almost 7 years since I've done that.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, don't do academia.
Chris, is our sponsor Audible.com yet? We can recommend something for Beth.
This time we watched Season 1, Episode 1, The Crawling Eye. Prologue. 3 British mountain climbers in the Swiss Alps. The lead climber loses his footing. When the other 2 attempt to pull him up, one of them looks away in horror before the frayed rope gives way. When his companion climber demands to know why he didn't help to pull their doomed companion to safety, he responds,
Didn't you see
What
him?
are you talking about?
His head! It was torn off!
You say that like it's a bad thing.
After some surprisingly upbeat opening credits, the movie begins with 2 sisters traveling by train through the Alps. And the younger, more fragile-looking sister suddenly passes out on top of their cabin companion, a hard-faced American by the name of Alan Brooks, played by F Troop regular Forrest Tucker. When she wakes up, Anne demands that they curtail their trip to Geneva and head to Trollenberg Mountain, a remote tourist destination that Alan, coincidentally, is also going to. The travelers all get settled into the resort, where rumors of strange accidents on the slopes abound. This doesn't stop chippy British climbing enthusiasts Dewhurst and Brett, who get everyone in the hotel drunk before setting off for the mountain. Meanwhile, Alan heads for a nearby observatory run by German Groucho Marx, who informs Alan that there is a radioactive cloud at the top of the mountain. It's at this point that we learn that Alan Brooks is in the UN. Ooh. And apparently, it's his job to keep an eye out for this kind of thing. Heh. Back to the hotel. Anne and her sister Sarah are putting on a parlor show. Anne is something of a mind reader, you see. All are enjoying themselves when Anne suddenly goes stiff and begins narrating Dewhurst and Brett's buddy comedy in the mountain cabin. Alan phones the cabin, and Dewhurst is stunned to discover that Brett is missing. He then screams, and the line goes dead. A rescue party is assembled, though Anne, in a trance-like state, urges them to stay away. It turns out she's onto something, because some of the rescuers come across a zonked-out Brett who's hauling around a rucksack with Dewhurst's head inside. While Brett makes short work of the rescuers, Alan's rescue party finds the rest of Dewhurst. Everyone goes back to the hotel to regroup, only to discover that Brett has also returned, though he's acting a bit like he's been hit on the side of the head with a 2x4. He tries to kill Anne a couple of times before Alan shoots him. Okay, still with me? The radioactive cloud starts moving down the mountain, so the group retreats to the heavily fortified observatory. Alan briefly returns to the hotel to rescue a wayward young girl, and the monster is finally revealed. And it's an eye brain thing. Well, whatever it is, it's super gooey and comes equipped with tentacles and dry ice. The group makes it to the observatory, but apparently haven't learned their lesson about letting in cockeyed loners, and Hans, a two-headed local who had previously refused to go to the observatory, enters and immediately tries to kill Anne again. As the monsters close in on the observatory, Alan Brooks uses a scientific method to reason that if the eye-brains like the cold so much, they must really hate the heat. Some Molotov cocktails manage to keep them at bay until a firebombing raid finishes them off for good. So much for that alien invasion.
Welcome to the official first season of Mystery Science Theater 3000, which is technically the first episode of the second season of Mystery Science Theater 3000. Not to be confused with episode 201, Rocket Ship XM, which we discussed on the first episode of It's Just a Show. Confused? You won't be after this episode of Soap! Doctors Forrester and Earhart have moved out of Gizmonic Institute and are now residing in their new lair, the radiation-soaked Deep 13. Joel recognizes it from the time he had to clean a spill of Disney's flubber from down there. On to the invention exchange, the Mads present dog pineal extract, an injection of which can help produce pesky, inconvenient sweating. Side effects may include heavy panting. Joel's invented the electric bagpipes by rigging a leaf blower to the only musical instrument more obnoxious than a ukulele. The bots join him in a rousing bagpipe-only rendition of Led Zeppelin's Whole Lotta Love, before the Mads send him the crawling eye. There are no buttons on the set to open the doors to the theater, so Joel punctuates movie sign by spanking the naked console, presumably for discipline. Amid talk of decapitation in segment 2, the bots realize that they can put their heads back on, but Joel can't, so play safe. This prompts further questions about phrases like head games, losing your head.
And how do you explain head cheese?
Well, head cheese, I don't explain head cheese, but here are some people who do.
Gypsy's hiding in shame after her lengthy coils unspool all over the satellite of love in segment 3. Joel lures her out with the promise of a tasty ram chip, and he, Crow, and Tom Servo try to find and scratch an itch she has somewhere among her miles of coil. In a callback to the mixed pronouns for Gypsy in the KTMA days, Servo thinks he's narrowed down Gypsy's sex. Before that awkward conversation can continue, Joel discovers her coils are trapped in the theater door, and the experiment continues once she's pried free. In segment 4, Crow and Servo don't get why an eye is so scary, so Joel explains humans have an innate fear of roving body parts. The bots are still confused by the premise, so Joel proposes that the movie's giant eyes come from a world made just for them, where the highways are made out of nerve and they don't have to take shop class. It's ram chips and dip for the bots in the final segment, as Joel tasks each of them to name one good thing and one bad thing about today's experiment. Gypsy didn't watch the film, so Joel asks her to add 2 + 2. Richard Basehart is her answer, giving a glimpse into the purple robot's cold heart. Back in Deep 13, the Mads are happy and promise the experiments will continue. Approximately for, 10 years, then a lengthy break, and then they might pick up again.
Adam, I know a lot of us tend to avoid the first season. What did you think of this episode?
It's good for what it is. How about that? As an awkward kind of first go at this, it's fine. I would never recommend it to pals as a place to start for Mystery Science Theater. Like the early days, like anything before Rocket Ship XM, anything before like season 2, I would say is for like hardcore Mystery Science academics only. But yeah, I was at the very least pleasantly surprised by like several really good jokes. And a lot of charm among some dead spaces. But what about you?
Yeah, I was surprised. I had always avoided it, I think because I had seen exactly one season 1 episode before this one. And surprisingly, even though the writers were very clear to Comedy Central that they didn't want them to show any more season 1 episodes, they did manage to slip one into one of the Turkey Day specials.
Oh.
Yeah, and I thought it was this one, but it was actually The Crawling Hand.
Yeah.
I did watch that, and it's hard. It's not funny at all. It's a real slog. And this one pleasantly surprised me. It's not great, and like you said, it's certainly not something that I would recommend people casually watch, but it is funny, and it was a lot tighter than I thought it would be. As you said, there were some funny jokes here and there, and they have a long way to go, but it's not as depressing as I thought it would be.
Yeah, if they ever release a box set of season 1, I hope not as depressing as I thought it would be, is the bull quote they use. But yeah, it's sorry, I just I had to contain my reaction there, because when you mentioned that the one season 1 episode you saw was The Crawling Hand, that was the first one I saw. And it totally put me off the early era, because in the early days of the internet, like in the mid 90s when I was getting into the show, word from both fans and everybody involved, presently and formerly at Best Brains at the time, said, season 1's not us at our best, don't bother. And Rhino inexplicably released The Crawling Hand among their wave of VHS tapes. And because of that, I didn't buy it sight unseen as I did with every other episode at that time. I rented it, and I didn't even finish the tape. Like, I actually, this is unheard of, at least for me at the time, but I stopped watching Mystery Science Theater because it wasn't funny. I stopped the episode because it was terrible. Yeah,
I really wonder why both Rhino and Comedy Central thought that should be the marquee representation of the first season, because it was a terrible introduction to the first season. This one would have been much better.
Yeah. In fact, I tried when the show was canceled I guess for the third time on Sci-Fi, and was like canceled for longer than it's ever been canceled before. I tried going through the show in order. I thought that would be a fun thing to do. And I kind of got into the groove of those very early shows. I guess to explain to like someone who has no idea what we're talking about, we're going to need to turn the dial back to KTMA 23. Because before season 1, 21 episodes of MST3K were produced for a UHF station in Minneapolis, KTMA. And those episodes were unscripted, so the riffs were sparse and improvised. No writing means no show Bible either, so Joel and company tinkered with the premises they went along. In the early KTMA shows, Joel seems to be watching the movies for his own amusement instead of being forced to watch them by the Mads.
Yeah, and if you want to hear this straight from the horse's mouth, Joel Hodgson was interviewed on WTF with Mark Maron recently, and he talks about this exactly, how the KTMA show came together. And he basically said it's like watching us riff at a party, like it wasn't scripted at all.
And I would more or less agree with that assessment. It's just that I found especially over time that all the cast members kind of got into a groove, and it became fun. Now, don't get me wrong. I think improv is the devil in comedy and should be banned. It should never be allowed. Scripting only. But the cast gels, I think, really quickly because they're thrown into the wilderness. I think that's one of the reasons why the season 1 chemistry is really good. They don't really take that long to gel either in like season 1 or the KTMA days. And I think it's because they had to just like watch this movie and panic. And I guess in fairness to like season 1 and the KTMA stuff is that they are inventing a totally new genre of comedy here. Like riffing did not exist before Mystery Science. So that all of these early episodes, regardless of what year you're watching them in, everything before season 2, like they're creating something brand new, and they don't like, there's no template. They don't know how to do it. So it's a lot slower. There's like long pauses, I think even in season 1 episodes, where they're trying to give the audience as much information about the movie as possible, as opposed to, by the next year, like by season 2, like they're just talking over large chunks of dialogue because they know that people came for the jokes. They did not come necessarily to watch, I don't know, Wild Rebels.
Yeah, my impression was that at first it was almost like they were hosting the movie, right? Like they were just kind of the contextualizing bubble around a movie that you would actually just watch. And when it became more and more obvious that people were watching it for them and not for the movie, they felt that they could get rid of that need to present the movie first. And it was funny also in that interview with Mark Maron, Joel mentions that what really clicked for him was when he put together a whole bunch of clips of their best moments from KTMA to sell the show to Comedy Central, which was just, what was it named at that time? Was that just the Comedy Channel or something?
I think it was Comedy Channel.
Yeah. And then it was like a light bulb. He's like, oh, this is how it should be. Like, it should be this tight all the time. We really need to start just writing things in. And that's what shifted over in season 1. And yeah, that was the one thing that I can say that really struck me about the first season. The chemistry is already there. Like, it's not like you get with a first season of a show where all the actors are trying to feel their way around each other and try to that sounds dirtier than I meant, but they're just trying to, like, you can tell there's always an awkwardness in the first season that isn't here. They already feel comfortable with each other's rhythms, and that is obviously because they had secretly already had a season together.
Yeah, it's something that I think everybody picked up on. Like even Josh Weinstein said in the oral history, and I quote here from Wired when they did an oral history of Mystery Science. He says, "We eventually realized, hey, this might be funnier if we had some jokes in our back pocket."
So if you haven't seen the first season, you might be surprised to see that TV's Frank is not there. Instead, we have another doctor who's called Dr. Erdhart, and it's played by J. Elvis Weinstein, who was known as Josh Weinstein at the time. And so he both plays the squeaky voice Dr. Erdhart, and he also does the voice of Tom Servo in the first season.
I will say that I took to his Servo pretty well. Like, Josh is really funny, I think, in the theater and on The Satellite Love. He's definitely like a more bullish and almost Ted Baxter-like. I don't know if you watched the Mary Tyler Moore show, but
yep.
Yeah, he's very much like that. And I know that Weinstein said that like his inspiration for the character was like airheaded morning DJs. How is it watching like Tom Servo? I know we've had a change with Baron Vaughn in the new season, but how do you find like, you know, when people think of Servo, they naturally, I think, tend to think of Kevin Murphy. So what is it like for you watching these early episodes? And it's like, I don't associate that voice with that puppet. I'm sorry.
Servo feels like anybody can do him, and he has a certain carriage about him that you can just kind of shift your way in pretty easily. I certainly didn't find it as disturbing as I did it when Crow was switched to Bill Corbett for the Sci-Fi era. I found that really hard to adjust to. This was fine, although apparently not everybody felt that way. And we mentioned that in our very first episode, how Kevin Murphy got some hate mail or a hate banner about how much somebody hated his new voice.
Usually it's better, I think, when if an actor takes over like a voice role, or like in this case a puppet role, not to imitate the person they're replacing. But Kevin kind of did that, especially like in his first few seasons. Like you can tell he's really like emphasizing his voice to sound a bit more like Josh's, so it's not quite as abrupt a transition. At least that's what it sounds like to me. I think that even though Josh sometimes gets short shrift from fans, it's like, you know, he kind of laid the groundwork for, you know, what this character was personality wise and kind of sound wise.
Yeah, exactly.
Dr. Earhart, on the other hand, how did you find that?
He was hard to watch.
Another one of the reasons why I found, oh yeah, because I didn't mention this. I tried to go through the episodes in order way back when. KTMA, I found like built momentum and was kind of fun and kind of charming. Fun fact, at least if you ask me, KTMA has the best door sequence of any of the shows.
Really?
Oh yeah, it's really clever, especially considering that they did it for like probably $10. But if you watch those early episodes, when the Mads are introduced, Weinstein's not doing that voice. He's kind of speaking closer to his natural tone of voice. He's just great when he's just speaking on his own. He has like a natural kind of sinister voice for playing a mad scientist. And we got Dr. Earhart instead, and it's Weinstein doing a castrati voice.
Clay, I think I was spotted on my way down here.
It was a great relief to me that the Mads did not come back in any of the segments after the introduction.
Yeah. Aside from the end, where I don't think Larry may only have one line, that was a huge relief. I mean, don't get me wrong, like Trace is great. Like Dr. Forrester more or less arrives like complete. He's like intact. But it's interesting, and it's something that you mentioned to me earlier, which was that, you know, there's a very different dynamic between Earhart and Forrester than what you'd get with Frank.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're supposed to be more colleagues because they're both doctors, and I don't know what kind of relationship they had in the KTMA episodes. It certainly seems that, you know, Forrester's the top, if I can put it that way. But it's still like it's more of a colleague situation. And it was such a good idea when Weinstein left the show that the replacement would be an underling, because Forrester, as a character, does not broach sharing authority. So I think that was a really good move on their part. It just didn't quite work for him to have a chum. For this Origins trilogy, we're really focusing on the hosts. So what did you think of Joel's ostensible first episode as the head person? Oh, God.
He is credited as head person in the credits, like that, to be fair.
Head person. As the human. How did he do as the human?
I thought he was a terrific human. Joel is he's like a little different. In a way, it's a bit closer to his stand-up act, where his natural shyness kind of comes out. And of course, this is what led so many Mystery Science fans and early watchers of the show to think that he was actually just a huge stoner waking and baking every day, because he's like avoidant with eye contact.
Very much so.
And there's a few times, I mean, I noticed this more like in the KTMA episodes, but there's a few times where he just seems to be like looking at the puppeteers beneath the console rather than looking at the puppets. But that just adds to the charm. Like, I feel like Joel's energy in general is like what you'd expect. Like, he's a bit spacey, no pun intended. He's like a little off the wall. He has kind of a brain that thinks more in kind of pop culture references of like 50s and 60s TV he grew up with, rather than practical things. And he's really lovable and really charming. Like, I can see why this show would be a hit if people were attracted to it based on the personality of the host.
Even at this early point, he's kind of familiarly comfortable. Like, he just seems like somebody who'd be so so easy to hang with. Like, just no judgment. Like, that, I think that's the main thing, is that he doesn't seem to have any judgment about how terrible the movie is. He's just going through it, and he's just making it pleasant no matter what. And just to plug the WTF interview even more, my favorite moment is when Joel talks about why he decided to focus on these movies, these B movies from like the 50s and 60s, and he just describes them like, they're adorable. Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah.
Just has so much love for them.
That's one of the things that I've always kind of gotten from Joel, and I'm really happy that there's been no like kind of curtain pulling where he's different than he appears on screen. Like, Joel seems to be a really sweet fella who seems to have a great affection for pop culture in general, which would, of course, lead to creating a show like this that celebrates pop culture in both the writing and in the movies being watched. And yeah, you can't pimp that interview enough, because it is great.
Were there any particular moments in this episode that really stuck out for you?
Yeah, actually, like, the episode is charming, and I liked all the host segments. And I think that very early on, like, in fact, one of the first things that happens in the movie, we see a shot of the mountain. And Tom's line where he goes, "Oh, hey, it's a Paramount picture." And already, like, they get off the bat with a really good joke. And I thought, it's like, okay, this season 1 might not be all crawling hands. Did you have a favorite moment from this episode?
Yeah, I would say I had one favorite riff moment and then one moment from the movie, which we'll get into a little bit more in a bit. But the riff was near the end, where the now abandoned hotel is panned through very slowly to show how sinister and abandoned it is. And they just start riffing on the decor.
Wow, is that tastelessly done? It's such a mishmash of styles.
I love me a decor riff. I love those jokes. And at one point, they go past this very strange-looking, deep-seated chair, and Tom Servo just said, "Oh, someone with a really big butt must have sat in there." It was just so sophomoric that I just burst out laughing.
Yeah, and even in this same episode, not to interrupt, but even in this same episode, like, this might be the first instance of one of those look-alike jokes, because I remember when Anne is passed out, the riff is, Fanny Flagg and Groucho Marx and Carl Sagan.
Yeah. So, and the movie itself, which we haven't talked about too much yet, the reveal of the monster happens very late in the movie. And what happens is a little girl goes back to get her ball and the eye crashes down the doors. And I just love this kid so much. Like, you might as well have just had a cardboard cutout of a toddler, because this kid just stands there staring. And as someone who has a 3-year-old myself, I'm just like, yeah, that's what kids do. If you have them in a strange place surrounded by adults they don't know, they just stand there. It would have been so much better if the movie would have used a dog instead, because you could at least get a dog to bark at something. The crawling eye had a lot of promise. Like, I think it felt like it was fairly well put together in a lot of ways. Like, the build-up at first seemed really well done to me. So I think this could have been a good movie if just certain things had been tweaked. So, for instance, the things they did well: good atmosphere. The slow burn at first was well done. Some good characters. A well-established universe in terms of, like, this has already happened. There's something strange occurring on the mountains of the world where we have this radioactive gas, and it seems to be disrupting the world in a very disturbing way. And then we have what I thought was the most intriguing character in the movie, which is Anne, who has some kind of psychic power. She's able to read minds, she's able to see what's happening, and she's the one who really gets the movie going, because she looks at the mountain and then she passes out and she starts to key into what's happening at Trollingberg Mountain. But nothing is done with it. Absolutely nothing. Like, for some reason, the monsters zombify people and try to get them to kill Anne for some reason, but it's never established why. Like, so she can see what's going on, but it doesn't lead to anything. She doesn't provide any insights whatsoever into the aliens and what they're doing. And she just turns into just a stock damsel in distress, which is really annoying. So if I was doing this movie over again, I would make her psychic powers like key to solving the entire alien problem. Not only does she have some insights into what they're doing there, but she would be the one who brings forth how to destroy them, as opposed to just lighting them on fire, which is just like, really?
In fairness, a good way to ruin an eye is to set it on fire. That is ripped from the headline, so to speak.
Like the same thing you use to get rid of like dry leaves is how you solve an alien invasion.
That's usually what happens when like a screenwriter's out of ideas. Like, how do we kill the monster? You set it on fire. Well, if I were to fix this movie, I'd throw out 90% of it. Get rid of Trollenberg, get rid of all of it. Who cares? All right, so you make it this. Anne is a psychic in a cool city like Seattle or something, and she's a palm reader and stuff. And it seems like she's a charlatan, but really she's not. She's got cool psychic powers. But anyway, oh no, people around her are acting strange. It's a real pod movie, and she's having weird visions of seeing things from eyes, but eyes that wouldn't be on the regular part of a person's body. Oh no, friends and even government officials and people of authority have been possessed by eyes, but no one will believe her. Eyes from beyond the moon, I tells you, are climbing into people's bodies and taking them over. So she tries to raise awareness of alien eye overlords, as most people would do in that situation, a real Kevin McCarthy type. And instead, no one will believe her. Surprise, surprise. So the first thing she does, she runs up to some guy. He'll be a big fat guy, and she'll take a knife and slice his guts. But a bunch of eyes fall out, and she'll say, "See, does nobody believe me?" But no one believes her because everyone's taken over by eyes. And then there'll be all sorts of crazy body horror stuff. Like maybe she meets up with someone, her love interest, and it looks like they're going to head to bed. But when he takes off his pants, oh no, it's not a regular man down there. It's an erect eye on a stalk. She has to run away. And the eyes, they're coming. They're going to take us over. And but she stops the eyes plan somehow. I guess fire. I'm running out of ideas here. But just when you think everything is over, she goes. It's like 5 years later, and she's like, married and settled down. And she goes to pick up her morning paper, and it gets a kid on a bicycle, and he's got his hat backwards, and he's throwing the newspapers. And she takes that. She looks at the kid a little strangely, but then shakes her head and goes back into her house. The camera pans over to the child. He turns to face the camera, and it's actually just a giant eye in a T-shirt with its hat backwards and like blonde hair on. And then the camera pulls out into outer space. And it's not Earth, but in fact an eye. The eyelid has been painted so that you see water and territories on it, and then it opens up and it's a big eye, and then it says the end, but it's not the end ? It's the end in Terabang.
Oh boy.
I'm calling it Untitled Crawling Eye Project 2017.
All right. Yeah. Okay. I like it. But I disagree. I think this movie could have worked with better editing and a more thoroughly worked out sequence. I like that it happened in the Alps. I thought that created kind of an exotic flavor that worked really well for this movie. This was done in the 50s, where the UN was actually considered like a serious institute that could actually get things done in the world. So that was an intriguing peek behind the curtain there. But yeah, some things just fell flat, and the main one being that it took way too long to introduce the monster. We should mention that for the American release, this was actually a British movie. They cut out 10 minutes of the movie to make sure that the monster showed up earlier. So it actually took longer for the eye to show up in the original cut.
Yeah, they cut it down, and yet it's still really boring.
Yeah.
More eye, please.
Yeah, I do agree. It's too bad there weren't more eye boners, though. One of the most intriguing things I thought about this movie, as I said, was Anne the psychic, who can read minds, which I guess, and can see what's happening at the moment, which I think makes her clairvoyant. Do you know more about psychic species than I do, Adam?
Psychic species? Is this Pokemon? Well, like a lot of people who watch a lot of horror movies, my biggest experience with psychics is the old cliche of your heroine having a psychic link to a killer or a monster because it's very convenient. And sure enough, unexplained psychic connection is also here in one of the earliest examples of the trope that I can think of. But off the top of my head, it's like in real life, I know that I know a lot of credit was given, at least kind of in like pop culture or pop memory, that psychics regularly or at least are sometimes considered with like hard to solve cases and things like that. But even a slight Googling reveals that to be mostly a crock of crap. So really, when I think of psychics, I think about that guy, Uri Geller. Did you ever hear that guy?
No, I haven't.
All right. Uri Geller is the man who brought us the bent spoon. He's the guy who said, I can bend spoons with my mind, among other things. So he was actually like going touring with this. But when he was on the Johnny Carson show, Carson was of course, a stage magician, so he kind of like knew baloney when he saw it. He also invited skeptic James Randi, who was one of the founding members of the CSI COP, a skeptic society whose acronym will be in our show notes explaining what that is, because I don't remember it off the top of my head. But when he was on the Tonight Show, using selected spoons by Randy and Carson, he experienced performance anxiety and could bend no spoons. And I guess the little button on that would be that Uri Geller still achieved some kind of cultural notoriety, because in 1996, Ken Russell, the amazing and late British director who made The Who's Tommy and Listomania, among other things, did a biopic of sorts called Mindbender, that is all about him being the chosen one and him having special powers. And Russell is clearly not taking this seriously and just using this as a vehicle for his goofy Fellini-esque visuals. But the movie ends with a plea from the real-life Geller asking viewers to believe and touch their TV screens so they can communicate with him. I don't know if this works on like the DVD copy I have, but Uri Geller, if you felt my hand, write in.
Obviously, most psychics, self-reported psychics out there are just money-grubbing charlatans, and I have nothing but contempt for most of them. But I do wish that it was a possibility to be psychic, obviously, because one of my favorite books as a young girl was a book called The Girl with Silver Eyes. Have you heard of it?
No.
No. I think it's very much like a girl novel, and it's written by Willow Davis Roberts, and it's about a girl with silver eyes, but she also has telekinetic powers. And she's freaking out her grandmother by turning pages with her mind, and she says she finds it really hard to turn off the lights without just using her mind. And the way it was described was so convincing that I still have dreams where I myself have telekinetic powers, and it just seems so natural that you would be able to turn off a light switch with your mind. And I get so disappointed whenever I wake up and I can't do it anymore.
Wait. If you had telekinetic powers, you're just using it to do things around the house.
Exactly. Well, what else would I do with it? Like, it made it clear that you can't like lift a car with it. Like, it's just you basically can do with your mind what you can do with your body, right?
Oh.
So you can't do much more than just like, I'll put that banana over there, which seems like a very realistic version of telekinesis.
See, I'm not so sure I would want that, because like if I see something cool, like in Friday the 13th Part 7, where a psychic throws a house on Jason Voorhees, that's what I want. I want to be able to have uncontrollable power in moments of rage. I mean, if I can't, that's like having the ability to fly, but only for 90 seconds.
But with great power comes great responsibility, Adam. Haven't you ever seen a superhero movie?
Yeah, but you know what? One of the things I love about Spider-Man is how wisecracking and irresponsible he is. So I'm getting mixed messages from old Stan the Man Lee.
But anyway, yes. So I've always been a real skeptic about anything to do with psychics, and especially like fortune tellers and mediums, like people who claim to be able to tell the future, or people who claim to be able to speak to the dead, because those premises just on their face are so dumb that I hold contempt for them. But briefly, I was in a moment when I was feeling very vulnerable, and I did go see a card reader.
Oh, really?
Yes.
What was that like? So
what happened was I had just gone through a very unexpected and very discombobulating breakup, and I had rebounded really quickly with this other guy, and simultaneously my best friend was leaving to go to Korea to teach English as a second language. And so I was just reeling, and also I had just moved to Toronto and everything was just different, and I was just like feeling very unsettled. So when a friend of mine was going to a restaurant that also had this card reader, I'm like, hey, why not? So the first thing she does, she doesn't even bother with a cold read, she just asks me what's going on in my life. So I say, oh, well, first of all, this I had this breakup and now I'm seeing this new guy. And what she got from that is, oh, well, in 6 months, another man will come in your life and you'll have to choose between the two and he'll be very athletic. And I'm basically like, if you know anything about my dating history, athleticism doesn't usually come into play. But so immediately like, And then I just mentioned that my best friend was leaving. And she said, oh, yes, I'm picking up on that. You were sisters in another life and you were both Indians.
What?
Yeah, like Native American sisters or something like that. Like just the layers of white nonsense that I had to peel away from that. Like, I don't even want to get into it. It was actually a good experience because I walked away from that. Like, I walked in feeling so like I didn't know what to believe about me or my life. And I came out being like, well, I still don't believe in that horse shit. So,
yeah. You had your own convictions confirmed, at least thanks to a run-in with Miss Cleo. Although one thing eerily turned out to be true, and I don't want to pull back the curtain too much for our listeners, but Beth is actually married to sports superstar Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
I should say that rebound I ended up marrying, so.
Oh. Did you have to choose between him and another guy?
No athletic dude came in trying to woo me 6 months in.
Well, fair enough. In the interest of time, because the pressure is mounting, and we're running out of time, we're going to announce 10 quick facts about the crawling eye. The clock is ticking. Beth, go!
Joel and the Bots make a lot of references to sitcoms from the 60s and 70s, including Leave It to Beaver, Starsky and Hutch, Fantasy Island, Green Acres, and obviously F Troop. These guys are not of my generation. They are solidly baby boomers.
Another fun fact, Jimmy Sangster, screenwriter of, among other things, Hammer's Curse of Frankenstein and a movie called Who Slew Auntie Roo, wrote The Crawling Eye. And I like a lot of his stuff, but if you want to get acquainted with Jimmy Sangster, don't watch a movie. Watch an episode that he wrote for Kolchak the Night Stalker called Horror in the Heights, where Darren McGavin's Kolchak and Phil Silvers have to fight a flesh-eating demon in Roosevelt Heights.
Also, the bot design is still being evolved at this stage, and amongst them, Tom Servo, his arms are coming out of his pecs. They get moved back later on to their proper alignment in subsequent seasons.
Yeah, Servo looks like a child's drawing of himself. But also, like, did you see in the theater, like, he and Crow also look super weird during those segments? It's because they used, like, the rickety, falling apart KTMA versions of the bots, which is why Crow looks like a waffle fry that was left out in the rain.
So speaking of weird body structures, J. Elvis Weinstein's costume makes his head look too small and his hands look too big. Very disconcerting.
Also disconcerting is Laird Moulton's 2.5-star rating for The Crawling Eye, which, for those of you keeping track at home, makes it every bit as good as the following movies: Heathers, Miller's Crossing, Sophie's Choice, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, and of course, Laser Blast.
In the Amazing Colossal Episode Guide, Jim Mallon summarizes the first season by talking extensively about the various personal computers they had at the time. And he introduces the guide with an entire section bad-mouthing Kevin Murphy. Both sections seem pretty poorly conceived.
Boo on Jim Mallon. But yay to the Misfits, whose 1999 song, The Crawling Eye, tells this movie's story better than the movie does.
Speaking of weird shoulders, at one point, Forrest Tucker, our lead, breaks down a locked door using his shoulder. Don't ever do this. If you need to break down a door, you give it a good kick. Your foot exerts a lot more force than your shoulder, and you'll be able to direct that force to a locking mechanism more effectively.
And finally, we tried to find something interesting to say about Forrest Tucker, but we couldn't. He died having touched no one on a physical, emotional, or spiritual level. And that's time!
So, we like to talk about the monsters and how effective they are as monsters. What did you think of The Crawling Eye?
I really applaud this movie for giving us like a lot of bang for a buck in a sense. Like, yes, it takes forever for the monsters to show up, but there's more than one crawling eye in like the climax of this movie. There's like 15 of them.
I thought they were really good. I mean, the biggest problem with monsters from the 50s is they're just obvious rubber suits. And this, I don't know how they did the effect, and we should describe, it's not really an eye. It's an eye inside of a brain. So, and then there's tentacles coming out of it. So it has a vaguely jellyfish-like look to it.
Yeah, it kind of looks like a fleshy technodrome.
Yeah, okay. And the eye and the brain are very viscous looking, like they look very liquidy, and there's something very off-putting about that. So I thought the effect was quite well done.
Yeah, the special effects are amazing for the time, and like the eyes look great. These are really cool looking monsters, and this is one of those movies that I think, you know, it doesn't make for a great like movie watching experience. Would make for a great trailer, provided that they showed you everything from the climax, because it's just eyes rampaging all over the place, and that's about it. But at least you have that. And I can't help but wonder, have you ever been tempted to get like LASIK eye surgery, which is all the rage?
I have had LASIK eye surgery.
You have, but I've seen you with spectacles.
Yeah, don't get it too young, because then you'll just end up having to wear them again.
Okay, lesson learned.
So the situation was, my parents had an incredibly generous healthcare package, and it covered, not only did it cover laser eye, it covered laser eye for children. So I got it right before I got cut off, about 23. So I got it when I was 22 years old. And at that point, I was moderately myopic. And then I did a PhD and it wrecked my eyes again. So back to glasses I went.
Is moderately myopic the name of your blog?
It really should be.
Now, I can't help but wonder, because I'm pretty sure that they don't give you an anesthetic for LASIK. No, they don't give you like a local or anything.
No, they freeze your eye. You don't feel it.
Okay, but you're still like aware, right? You're still watching it happen. Because what else are you going to do?
Yeah, it's really funny. What happens is like they kind of strap you down so you can't move, and then it feels like almost like they put a paintbrush over your eye.
Mm-hmm.
But what really happens is they've just cut off your lens, and then there's a whole bunch of lights when they adjust the lens, and then they just coat it back off. Apparently, it is such an easy surgery that a chimp could do it. This is what I hear.
Yeah, I don't want a monkey anywhere near my eyes. This seems bad. But I do have a question for you. I don't know how vivid this experience for you, but like, okay, so there's a big laser going into your eye, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what does burning eye smell like? And follow up, because this is just my theory. Does it smell like scrambled eggs? Because that's what I think it would smell like.
I don't recall any smells. So our entire family did it, and everyone but my sister had a good experience. She got a special technique done that in retrospect, she really shouldn't have done. And I wasn't there, but my mother describes, I knew something was wrong because there was blood.
Oh, God.
And she didn't lose her eyesight or anything, but she had a few complications afterwards. And she, like me, is also back in glasses. So, meh.
Except for like her awkward teen years, she had like smoking craters for eyes.
I'd recommend it if you can swing it. Side effects are you might have dry eye. I can't wear contacts anymore because my eyes are very dry.
And you know what? If any listeners have had the laser surgery done, please write in to tell me what burning eyes smell like, because I want to know.
Yeah, apparently my olfactory senses were not working that day. I was too focused on my eyes being cut open.
Did you have a laser focus?
You could say I have an eye for details.
Oh.
Moving on.
On a scale from weird to super weird, Beth, how weird is season 1, having watched the first episode?
It felt actually pretty not weird. Like I said, they were pretty well established in terms of their chemistry. The host segments were not awkward. Obviously, there's some cast changes that are going to be coming fairly soon, but it felt established. Clearly, they had already been secretly working on the kinks somewhere else, so it didn't have that first season awkwardness that you often get with shows. For instance, legendarily, Star Trek The Next Generation had a terrible first season where nobody knew what they were doing, and the total shifts were quite head-reeling. So they managed to avoid all that first season awkwardness, I think.
Although that means we were probably deprived of an amazing episode in which Deep 13 gets taken over by brainworms that causes one dude's head to explode, which is the best episode of The Next Generation.
Oh, good point.
Fun fact. But yeah, like I'm with you. Like, yes, the riffing's not exactly fast and furious, and I would say that like it's almost as though Josh and Trace are like following Joel's lead, because like everybody's low key in the theater as opposed to just Joel, which I think is kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. And there's a rather than having commercial sign and commercials just being part of the makeup of the show, they're kind of referencing the fact that there'll be commercials even in the theater.
Right.
which I thought was like super weird. Although I did like that Josh announced one of them with, and now here's something you'll really like. Like, it's funny how like, even though this is like complicated and Mystery Science is kind of inventing something completely out of the blue with a movie riffing show, like, this isn't weird compared to, say, I don't know, the first season of The Simpsons, where it's kind of a dramedy and Smithers is black.
Or I'm even thinking of something like 30 Rock. Like in 30 Rock, at first, it was going to be a writer comedy. It's about being in a writer's room. And very quickly, the show, and I'm not complaining about this, became very much about Liz and Jack Donaghy.
Yeah, not to mention, like, I guess giving more of a chance for, Tracy Morgan and Jane Krakowski to shine.
Exactly. They weren't going to be the focus. It was really going to be about what the writers had to go through to make a show. And that got abandoned pretty quickly.
And, even some shows struggle to, like, find a tone, because it's always so alienating to me when I watch the first season of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and the main cast act like human beings, kind of. And it's weird. They're not monsters.
Yeah. And Dee is actually, like, she's kind of set up to be the scold a little bit, like the one who sets everyone straight. And it's such a waste.
Yeah, because I have to say, like, I think that she is, like, kind of the breakout of an already amazing cast. Like, when your cast is Danny DeVito and you are stealing scenes from him, you are very good at your job.
Oh, we need to talk about this in person someday.
Oh, absolutely. She is such a funny physical comedian. Like, just, like, Dee can do physical comedy in a way that, like, I have never seen before. She is so, but, like, everything she does, yeah, just screaming, she is funny. And I would listen to her yell at anybody for hours on end. She's great.
Yeah, but very much like good shows reveal that you have to give shows and creative people a chance to work things through. Because oftentimes they're not going to get it right away. And I think actually most studios understand this, that it takes a while to get that formula down and figure out what works with your crew.
Or at least they used to. I know that nowadays we live in a time when, like, pilots get massively retooled, as opposed to, like, we used to see that kind of process on air. Like, remember how, like, season 1 of Roseanne had, like, a recurring role for George Clooney and spent more time at her job than at her home?
I actually didn't even remember that about Roseanne, because it changed so dramatically. Like, it's always about her having a job, but it's about the struggle for finding a job and it never making enough money for her family, right?
Yeah, like her and Dan's relationship is key, but Dan is a minor player in the first season from memory. And then again, like every sitcom before they, I mean, this goes both ways. Sometimes shows go off the rails and they become terrible, but like usually, like a sitcom is almost too grounded in reality when it starts. Like, I know that News Radio, which is like one of those things I consider to be as important to me as like Mystery Science Theater way back when, its first season and most of its second season, totally fine, but it's just a slightly eccentric workplace show as opposed to a really surreal sitcom that it becomes.
So are we pro or con letting creatives work things out?
I'm pro. I like seeing this kind of stuff evolve on air, and I want to ask you this question, and it ties back to Star Trek again.
Of course.
Yeah, this is inevitable. But I find that I'm way more interested in watching a show find its feet than lose its way. So I actually enjoyed watching like The Crawling Eye more than I enjoyed watching Future War, and I enjoyed, bring it back to the Trek thing as promised. I find Trek when it's boring to be unwatchable, and I think like the last couple of years of TNG are not so good. But watching the consistently terrible first season where Wesley's sentenced to death for stepping in a flower pot, I could watch that every day.
Yeah.
Because it's exciting. There's a sense of we don't know what we're doing. There's a panic, and there's like throwing a bunch of ideas and seeing what sticks, and kind of embracing the weird kind of curlicues and inconsistencies that shows always have early on, and I kind of like watching that.
So because we are pro working things out, we hope our listeners also feel the same way, because I already find the first episode that we did unlistenable. So, Chris, do we have any random questions from listeners?
We sure do. Longtime listener and fan of the show, Martin from Winnipeg, asks, what was the best gift you ever got as a kid?
Oh man, I think the best gift I ever got was when I was young. I'm going to say around 8 years old when my dad set up his bachelor pad, and we would stay there on weekends. My brother and I. He gave us a bunch of posters so that we could decorate each half of our room. So I put posters on my side, and he put posters on his side. The posters that I received 3. We both received 3. The posters I received were as follows. Posters I received for the Jean-Claude Van Damme twins mixed up at birth movie Double Impact, where one is a cop and one is a criminal. A poster for Child's Play 3, which was a close-up of the Chucky doll with blood dripping out of its mouth. And a Garfield poster.
I had a Garfield growth chart.
I thought you were going to say I had Garfield growth hormones.
And so it was like a ruler, and at the very top, Garfield is jumping down and he's saying bonsai.
It's classic catchphrase.
I know. First of all, he doesn't say that very often. And secondly, I had no idea as a kid what that meant. So I would just sit there because it was in my bedroom. I would just sit in my room staring at it, trying to unlock its secrets.
Were you exercising your psychic powers? It's like I can bring this ruler over.
But yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that your gift was not like a Christmas gift, and it was more something that you helped to assemble yourself. Because my favorite gift was so my dad is a handyman. He still is. He builds things, and he fixes cars and stuff like that. So I actually had drawn a picture of an idealized playhouse, and of course it was very 7-year-old, front door in the middle, 2 windows at the top, and then a second story that had a slide coming out of it, and then swing sets on the side.
Cool.
And he built it.
That's really sweet.
Yeah, he built it. So I had this amazing playhouse in the backyard that I had helped envision.
How much of your life did you spend in that playhouse?
Surprisingly little, because it got dirty.
I'm sorry. Little Beth doesn't want to go into her playhouse since the possums moved in.
Well, that was because it wasn't insulated on the inside, obviously. So the local insect population got well established pretty quickly. But still, it was pretty amazing to have a say in something that was created like that. And what you said too, even putting up posters. I think that's a good insight into what kids really key into. Yeah, it's I think having kids do that, or especially in your case where you had an idea for what you wanted, and your father helped realize it. It helps a child assert its identity and its tastes, which is always really good. So here's to parents that just let their kids do whatever. Yeah, latchkey parenting is the only parenting.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you want to tell us about the sweet smell of burning eyes, or if you'd like to ask Beth and Adam a random off-topic question, get in touch with us. Email us at info@itsjustashow.com, visit our website at itsjustashow.com, or we're on Twitter at itisjustashow. We'd love to hear from you. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned on this episode of It's Just a Show, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/8. So this was the first of our Origins trilogy, but just as quickly as we were introduced to Joel, we need to say farewell. Oh, are those tears in my disembodied eye, or is the Molotov cocktail just kicking in? Next time, we'll be saying hello to Mike in Season 5, Episode 13, The Brain That Wouldn't Die.
Yay!
Do you remember this episode, Beth?
Vaguely. I don't remember being too much of a fan of the movie, but I'm really, really looking forward to seeing those host segments again. I seem to recall that it takes a while for Mike to establish his chemistry with the bots.
Yeah, there's some early days awkwardness here that is super interesting, and this was one of the first tapes released by Rhino, so I watched this episode a ton. I can't wait to watch this again. This is one of my favorites.
Oh, and we should also mention, and this is completely out of nowhere, thank you again to Shout Factory for putting this out on the internet so we could watch The Crawling Eye in as good as quality as you could possibly get.
Yeah, and the same is true if you go to the YouTube page for Mystery Science Theater 3000, the official one by Shout Factory. Not only is this episode up, but Brain That Wouldn't Die is up as well. So if you want to check that out before we do.
Until then, we hope you keep watching the skies.
Keep watching the eyes.
Poof.
Take it away, Theme Squad.
All right. Yeah. Okay. I like it.